talking the werewolf movie, The Hunting. This one is directed by Mark Andrew Hamer, who also co-wrote this, and stars Peyton Hillis, who was an American footballer, now having a hand at acting. So a low-budget werewolf movie. What is the story? So we have this kind of small town USA, and there seems to have been a rash of disappearances. And our local kind of police detective Connor, played by Hillis, is kind of on the case, and we find a body, and it seems to be mauled by some type of animal. And we kind of have this kind of wolf expert comes in from a kind of fairly local kind of wolf sanctuary, and it's nothing she's ever seen before. It could of course be a lycanthrope, a werewolf, a wolfman, if you will, stalking these woods of a night. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works with The Hunting. Okay, a low budget movie, expectations in place here, if you get what I'm saying. Okay, but there are some things I enjoyed about this movie. Number one, I think the director here has a very artistic sensibility in a lot of ways. I mean, the opening kind of sequence with the credits and stuff, I've got to say, was very moody, and it's shot particularly well with kind of like, large kind of moons in the background and things like that. Very, very effective, I have to say. And throughout the film, I've got to say I thought the direction, certainly in regards to sort of cinematography, camera shots, things like this, is well done. It's to a pretty good standard here, with one little caveat which I'll come on to. But nonetheless, I do think this is a fairly well shot movie, again, particularly for the kind of the lower budget. Also, what I think adds to this kind of on a kind of technical level is a pretty good score. I think the music here is used for the most part. There's one kind of like repeated sort of tune which kind of got a little bit repetitive, but a lot of the times I felt the music really did add to the atmosphere, and it was fairly kind of good and kind of used to kind of good effect here. The actual werewolf effects are a practical kind of suit, a man in a suit. So those of you who don't really like your kind of your horror movies with that CGI element, you'll be pleased to know the effects here are of a practical nature. And we have a full-on kind of like werewolf, kind of man in suit style kind of costume here, bipedal werewolf. Actually, I have to say the design of him looks more like a wolf man rather than a kind of werewolf, if that makes sense. If you kind of think back to the kind of like the 1930s kind of style wolfman, it's more along the lines of that than a kind of more snouted kind of modern style kind of werewolf, if that makes sense. But I didn't think the makeup looked too bad, to be honest with you. I think it was relatively kind of well applied. Again, for a kind of a low budget movie. The film does try to have somewhat of a kind of a mystery, a whodunit. That's fairly typical, I think, of a lot of werewolf films, because obviously this is something that transformed into a human. There's always that kind of that who is it kind of aesthetic that permeates a lot of these kind of werewolf movies, and that is true with this one. And the movie is as much about as trying to uncover the mystery of who this kind of werewolf is. It plays a lot like a kind of police procedural. Peyton Hillis' Connor character is our central lead here, and it's kind of through his kind of point of view that we kind of see the proceedings. So it kind of plays like a kind of procedure in a lot of ways. And there are a couple of okay, effects in regards to kind of body mutilation and things like that. Nothing particularly kind of excessive, but gore was to a reasonable effect. Relatively low kills though, I have to say. We'll come on to it again. Peyton Hillis, as I said, was once an American footballer. Football to you guys in America, American football to us here in the UK. And I got to say, I thought we did a pretty decent job here, and not a bad performance. To be honest, considering acting was obviously not his first choice of career necessarily, but I thought he still did a pretty good job here. Okay, so maybe what doesn't work in this movie. as I've mentioned, I think Peyton Hillis does a fairly good job in the acting. I'm not saying it's kind of like, it's Oscar worthy, it was particularly kind of deep, but okay for this kind of level of film. And there are a couple of other characters that I think do an acceptable job as well. However, there are maybe two characters here that I feel are fairly weak. I'm not going to point them out, but there are a couple of characters that have, reasonably substantial roles that I felt the acting was particularly kind of hammy and unnatural at times. A couple of scenes where I thought they did okay, but a lot of the time, I would say the majority, the acting I think from these two particular kind of roles was on the hamming up to kind of like 11 style a lot of the time, so it wasn't all that good. I think maybe the main problem with this film for me though was I think the reveal about what's actually going on came across as extremely convoluted. I understand what the movie was trying to do. It wanted to kind of have its cards close to its chest in regards to a reveal here, but I think it came across as very contrived and somewhat kind of convoluted, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, and I can't go into it without sort of spoiling anything here. But aesthetically, there's not much attention to detail. I think things could have been done to differentiate certain characters. This is the best way I would kind of describe it, without kind of giving anything too much away here. So the movie tries to kind of be clever, I think, with some of the kind of the shots leading up to the kind of the finale, so to speak, and the kind of the twist almost comes out of left field. I think it should. It's a little bit of a cheat. It's one of these twists where I feel it should have seeded a little earlier. So you could work it out with the kind of the as the story kind of goes on, as it stands. I feel it just kind of like it just happens. So the kind of the story elements here, there were some kind of issues with. The director here loves an establishing shot. It became, like I said, I quite liked the direction. I actually thought, a lot of it was kind of somewhat kind of artistic and kind of like good on a technical level. However, there is an overuse of establishing shots when kind of like leading up to, another kind of dialogue kind of sequence we have. Every time it seems there's like some type of establishing shot. And a lot of the time it's just a scenery or something, or it's an object in the foreground. And it's overused to the point where start noticing it, and it becomes distracting. So dial back a little bit on the kind of the establishing shots, I would say. The movie doesn't really have a huge amount of werewolf in it. We have an attack at the beginning of the movie, and then we have really nothing until probably the beginning of the final act of the film, the third act of the movie. And I feel maybe people will feel shortchanged in regards to having a true werewolf film where we have the werewolf as really the centre of the attention the whole time. Instead, I would say it's the mystery behind the werewolf which really takes kind of centre stage here. And the werewolf costume again, kind of like it's. I don't know, I didn't mind it, but I can see people being a little bit disappointed because it kind of just looks like a man in a suit. I think if you look a little bit closely, I think the makeup that's applied and the things on the hands, I think it looks kind of okay. I actually think the makeup is applied relatively well, but the design, I think, will look a little bit underwhelming, and it just kind of looks a little bit silly at times, I would say. I would have gone for say they could get a much bigger person to kind of play the kind of the werewolf, maybe shoot it a bit more in the kind of like in shadow and things like this, and the kind of the more Wolfman style flat face kind of aesthetic, I think looks a bit old-fashioned now, to be honest with you. Overall though, I still think it's an enjoyable film. I wasn't kind of like turned off at any point within the movie. I was, engaged in the kind of the plot here. I think Peyton Hillis makes a fairly kind of likable kind of lead character. But it's ultimately somewhat of a kind of a flawed film, but still certainly watchable. I'll give this one a 5 out of 10, a kind of an average low budget kind of horror film that is neither kind of like particularly great or particularly bad. So bang on a 5 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.